We would like to acknowledge that this podcast was recorded, produced, and created within the territory of Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq. Our relationship and our privilege to live on this territory was agreed upon in the Peace and Friendship Treaties of 1752. Because of this treaty relationship, it is to be acknowledged that we are all treaty people and have a responsibility to respect this territory.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Carolle de Ste-Croix, the Alumni Director at Mount Allison University. It's a pleasure for me to be here again on the When Ducks Leave the Pond podcast to have a conversation and really to introduce the wider Mount Allison community to Angela Harris. She's a member of the class of 1996, and welcome.
Thank you.
Well, the last time you and I had a big chat, we literally, as things happen in the Maritimes, we were sitting next to each other by accident on a plane. So really glad that we're able to continue that really great conversation on that little propeller plane to Toronto that we all know and love so much here in the Maritimes. So Angela's journey, just so everyone knows, really began in 1992 at Mount Allison. But she was a science student, a rugby player, and her career has gone on to such diverse things as athletic therapy, medical sales, and eventually entrepreneurship. She is now a speaker and a coach and the founder of Work of Heart, a thriving business and movement that's focused on leadership, wellness, and personal growth. And last year, Angela this past winter, actually, returned to Mount Allison as the entrepreneur in residence with the Office of Experiential Learning and Career Development, where she dedicated a lot of her time to mentoring and coaching student entrepreneurs. And Angela is here today to share that journey, some of the lessons she's learned along the way, and really how she helps people find insight on their true passion, or as she calls it, work of heart. So I have some questions for you, Angela.
I can't wait.
Me too. So you've had a dynamic journey from being a military brat to attending Mount Allison and then settling in Moncton and becoming an influential community leader. Can you share with everyone about your upbringing, kind of that constant moving from place to place, how that shaped your outlook on life and your desire to build community?
Yes. Well, thank you for the question. And thank you again for having me. Honestly, it is such an honor to be a, Mount A alumnus and to be part of this community. But, when I think about my journey, it sometimes feels surreal. I feel like I was just, starting at Mount Allison, all those years ago. I feel like it was just yesterday. And when I think about, growing up as a self-professed military brat, I'm putting that in quotation marks, it definitely had its moments. There were some, there are some things that I'm super grateful for, some things that were super challenging, with growing up and always starting fresh and having to, meet new people and make new friends. But I think what that allowed me to do was to get really clear on who I was and, the people that I wanted to be around and, started to recognize, how easy or sometimes how hard it was to start out new and to, introduce myself to people and, to really kind of, be able to look around and see things differently.
So Angela, when you arrived at Mount Allison, you were surrounded by first year students who were really doing, for most of them, would have been doing what you just described for the first time in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see yourself in those first year students trying to create a new space and a new community for themselves, which is something that you had done multiple times as a child and teenager?
I did not. You know, what's funny is I've never stopped to consider that. So thank you. Thank you for that question. I think I was so used to being kind of the, again, I'll use quotation marks, like the odd one out, and the, you know, the kid showing up that hadn't, you know, been at the same school for 10 years or whatever. I never really stopped to consider that. I do wonder, you know, being at this age and reflecting, I wonder if maybe it wasn't as challenging for me. Maybe, you know, it was kind of a bit more normal for me being there and, you know, starting fresh and figuring things out and trying to figure out, you know, who my people were and where to go to eat and all the things. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, you're firmly settled in Moncton and have been for some
Yes.
time. So, what is it about Moncton that made you decide that was kind of your forever home, at least for the long term?
So I moved back to Moncton when I was in grade 10. And so I did a couple of years of high school here, went on to Mount Allison. Then from there, I went out to UBC and, you know, went back to work at Mount A. And then I was in Winnipeg for a long time. And so I've been in Moncton now for, I think I'm at 18 years. So absolutely the longest I've ever been in one place, the longest I've ever been in one house. And essentially what happened, the shift that occurred for me was just, you know, that desire to be around family and recognizing that at the core of my being was I'm a maritimer and I wanted to be around my family. We were starting to talk about having kids and, you know, I wanted this to be where, you know, my kids grew up, and I wanted this to be where, you know, I grew up after, you know, I started my career. So Moncton was like really an easy decision. And once we moved here, I never really felt the need to move anywhere else.
Oh, well, it's
So,
nice. It's certainly nice for us to have you close to campus. And
yes.
we're going to talk a little later about your experience as our entrepreneur in residence. But first, I want to go back a bit about your time at Mount Allison. You were very involved in athletics.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's been a big part of your life. You were a rugby player and you continued your education in British Columbia and you became an athletic therapist.
Mhm.
Now, women's involvement in sports has been a growing topic of discussion. And
Mhm.
so, how do you see the role of sports empowering women and girls?
Well, I know that you don't have hours for me to talk about this, but I will say so talking about women in sports has, you know, it's become a lot more prevalent in the last couple of years, but some of us have been talking about it for decades, right? And recognizing for decades the importance of sports on kids and on development, on leadership, and how that, you know, how that impacts the so many of us. And, you know, kind of fast forwarding to now and essentially even, you know, just 2024, I mean, we can see the impact that women in sports and women in leadership roles has on literally everybody. It's not just girls, right? It's not just, you know, it's not gender based, but I feel as if it's something that so many people are recognizing the power of. I know for myself, anytime I talk about, um, you know, my journey and the impact that that rugby and sports had on my life, I say it like it literally changed my life. I couldn't even begin to really explain it to anyone other than to say, you know, being part of a team sport, being part of, you know, a community like Mount A and like Mount A rugby is, you know, it's like being part of a family, and it's, you know, all the different characters and, you know, all of the different memories made and, you know, opportunities to understand different relationship dynamics. So, when I think about my own kids, I knew it was important for me to introduce them to sports. Sports isn't for everyone, right? But I think it's just that concept of having kids being involved in things and having the opportunity to try different things out. Like, that's the important thing at the end of it.
How does your background in athletics, and obviously it plays a very important role, as I mentioned earlier, how does that impact the work that you do with work of heart? How
Mhm.
did it help you really kind of envision what you wanted to accomplish with this project?
I think, I played a lot of sports growing up. Some of them I was good at, some of them I was terrible at. It took me, I didn't start playing rugby until I was 18, until I was at Mount Allison. And for me, being part of the rugby community really helped me understand that there was a place for me. And it helped me realize that I really didn't need to be any different than I already was, that it was okay for me to be really loud and to be really intense and to be, some people would think, I'm like cutthroat competitive. And if we go to even like the physical side of things, I wasn't a tiny girl. And for me, rugby helped me find a place where it was actually better for me to be like big and strong and fierce and to be proud of it. And so I feel as if, rugby just kind of helped me find my way, and helped me, realize what, that I had a role to play. I mean, I talk a lot. There's lots of people who are quiet leaders, and I feel as if when I talk about finding your way and finding your work of heart, for me, it's, helping people get really clear on what's important to them and what's not, and to recognize that you don't need to change yourself, unless you want to change yourself, right? But you don't need to change yourself to like achieve your goals or to do the things that you want to do. You can do those things exactly as you are, and just keep, following your path.
Why don't we dig a little bit deeper into your business, work of
Yeah.
heart?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what the premise is, what is offered, and what if kind of someone went on the website on your website, what would they find? What does your business look like?
Yeah, it's funny. I pause and I'm like, okay, what does my website look like? I haven't looked at it in a little bit. But what I guess I'll pause to say, when I started Work of Heart, so that was in 2017. I really started it as, I didn't start it as a business. It started as an event. And I wanted to be able to help people, help themselves. And so it started off as a single event, and then, just really grew from there. So now what Work of Heart looks like is, it's a community online. It's like a huge following. I have a few thousand people between Instagram and a few different Facebook groups. And I still do events now. It evolved, I think it was around 2018, into more of the, business, business coaching, personal coaching, motivational speaking, leadership coaching. And then I would say naturally evolved. I did stop coaching. I did coach rugby for a number of years. We haven't talked about that yet. But when I stopped coaching rugby full time, what I, picked up along the way was doing more in the way of like performance coaching, mindset, visualization coaching for athletes and teams. And so, I I try to help people understand what I do, but I don't always want to put it in a nice, pretty box with a bow because there's always opportunities presenting themselves that I wouldn't want to say no to if it's something that fires me up. Like, case in point, I didn't have entrepreneur in residence on my bingo card ever for university, right? Like, that's not something that I would have ever thought was, something that would be a fit for me. If you told me that 10 years ago, I would have laughed at you. And so I think the message here is that if you continue to do the things that light you up and fire you up, and you keep, like, following the crumbs, eventually you're going to, find some pretty amazing things.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Hmm.
Now, you spoke about your social media presence.
Yes.
How do you leverage social media and your other platforms to promote your message of self-care and positivity? Like, I guess, how do you feel that these platforms, what role do these platforms play in building supportive communities?
Hmm. I there definitely, in my opinion, is no easy, simple answer for that. I think that social media has become very complicated. It's like a complicated relationship in our lives that is sometimes toxic and sometimes amazing at helping people find connection and find inspiration and find motivation to do things that they want to do, and to find the people that they want to connect with. So, I won't get into the the toxic side of it too much, but I will say, as an entrepreneur in this space, it can feel, sometimes it's really invigorating to know that you're helping even just one person, right? With, a positive story or a quote or, a workshop or whatever. But I think it's, again, like I used to say that I ended up, like, I created work of art. I used to say I created it by accident. I take that back now. But I really, when I started work of art on Facebook and on Instagram, I was sharing a lot of positive quotes and positive content, in an effort to, put more positivity out there. Not toxic positivity, but just to be like, a space for people to reflect and a place for people to think.
What do you mean by toxic positivity?
Um, I think that there's a lot of content out there, um, that doesn't truly meet people where they're at. So if you are going through, if you are in the depths of a depression, you're, grieving the loss of a loved one, you are, you have a family member who's sick, or you're just in a terrible, like a legitimately terrible place. That's not the time for me to be like, Carol, everything will be okay, because sometimes it won't. And so I think it's recognizing that you can place positive content there without being like, come on, like, everybody, let's get on board. Of course, everything's going to be okay, because sometimes it's not.
Now, you do mention and have been quite open about that you are someone who's faced their own mental health struggles.
Yes.
You've been really open about that, about and the importance of self-care,
Yes.
which you're referring to. How do you encourage people, especially women, to listen to their hearts and to take steps towards personal wellness? How do you encourage people just to accept the help,
Mm.
to have that realization that this is something they need to do?
Yeah, and thank you for the question, and, acknowledging, my journey. I think, You're asking really good questions. These are not like, I wish I could give you like much more simple answers, but the reality is that it's not simple for any of us. And I realized as I was sharing more of my stories, like on my good days and on my bad days and on my terrible days, that me sharing my journey was helpful for other people. It was helpful for myself. And, with the stories that I decided to share, it was actually quite therapeutic for me. So again, I won't say that it's definitely not for everyone. It does take a level of, I would say, vulnerability and, being at a point where you are, you're not triggering yourself by sharing, a situation or something that's happened to you. But yeah, so I've dealt with anxiety and depression, for most of my adult life. I've dealt with a lot of grief and a lot of, different traumas that I have been fortunate enough to have a lot of support and therapy around. I will say when people talk about self-care, as we see it talked about on online and in the media, it's not at all, I think, what it's not bubble baths and manicures for me. I think it's getting really, it's asking yourself the hard questions and being really conscious of where you're at and what you need, and being willing to, ask and accept help. Maybe that is, asking help from a family member. Maybe it's asking for help from a doctor, a psychiatrist, whatever that looks like for each person. I think that the more we talk about it and the more that, people like me, like you, are willing to share our stories, the easier that it gets for other people to be like, you know what, I feel that too. And so that's what happened with Work of Heart and with me showing up online was and I still continue to get those messages every day of people saying like, I needed that, or I'm a new mom and I thought something was wrong with me, or, I've had messages where I've had to redirect them, that, they were not in a good place, that they wanted to stay here, that they might have needed some intervention and, more extensive help. But as I said, I feel as if the more that, we share the stories of what we've gone through and, kind of help people understand, maybe what's normal. And I'm hesitant to use the word normal, but like what is like, let's say a normal or an okay level of stress or of burnout or of, of just like, just being maxed out. A lot of people don't realize that they're in burnout until they are really burnt out. And until, I will say too, until you've gone through some of these things, like you don't even realize you've gone through it till you're through the other side. So I think
which is the most ironic thing about things
yes.
like burnout, right?
Yes.
You're literally, you have to get better before you can even see how ill you are.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and what I really enjoyed when I was, kind of looking at your website and listening to some of the talks you've done is the emphasis that you put on that there's no one size fits all approach to self-care. And I think that's what you were kind of alluding to, saying, that toxic positivity. Well, if you do this and take a bath and put some candles on, it's going to be all fine, which for some it is, for some folks. But that that really all of us are very much individuals when it comes to this type of healthcare and
Yes.
self-care. So
Yeah.
great.
I think, the farther that I've gotten along on my journey, and, having had the support and the people around me that I have, I, and even going back to my sports background, you realize that there's, every single day is going to look differently. Every single situation is going to look differently. And to your point, like one size fits all doesn't work. And so it's so important to have, a toolbox or a menu of options to go to. Like whether you're talking about your career, you're talking about like managing, family stuff, or you're talking about, managing your own mental health or physical health. Like it's so important to have like a toolbox and try different things so that you're ready for whatever's next.
Let's talk about last winter for a little while,
Yeah.
for a little bit. Now, you
Okay.
just wrapped up a term as our entrepreneur in residence,
Yeah.
and you worked closely with students in a mentorship role.
Yes.
Uh, how'd that, like, did you like it? Did you have fun?
Oh my gosh. Like I don't even know how to, fully express it. Like I loved it. Like it,
Oh,
I saw some of, I saw some of my Mount Allison friends that, last week, and I was at sort of their wrap up for the summer. And I just honestly can't express enough, like how honored I was to be asked to do that and to have had the opportunity to show up in that space. Like I said, if you'd told me this or asked me about this like a year ago, I would have laughed at you. I'm pretty sure I laughed when I got the initial email, and I was like, well, they clearly must have meant that for somebody else. Right?
oh,
Like I'm like, why
goodness.
would they have asked me? But
Oh.
then I think I did reply to the email and they sent me more information. And as I read through the description of what they were looking for, I was like, it almost felt, again, I'll use that word surreal. Like reading through it and thinking about all of what felt like crazy things that I've done in my life and career, I was like, oh, well, I've done this, I've done that. Like that checks this box, right? And so you start to recognize like all those decisions that you made and places that you showed up at, and things that you said yes to, all of a sudden can sometimes make sense. So yeah, so for me, it was deeply satisfying. It sometimes felt emotional to be back on campus. I did, coach at Mount Allison a couple years ago. But in this capacity, it just felt like I was coming home.
Oh. And in fact, the students, so what was the format like? Did you meet with students individually? Was it to help them develop ideas or do business plans or mentorship? What did the actual role look like?
Well, I think, that was part of what I loved about it. Had I had sat down with them initially to talk about, what they were looking for, and talked about like some of the ideas that I had. And so it looked like a little bit of all the things that you just described. And so sometimes, I did a number of events on campus. So some of them were more of, let's call it like a lecture type of format, workshop. I did an interview with a couple of our alumni that, you know, that own Pump House Brewery. So we did that in the pub. I think it was our first event in the pub. I really pushed for that. I definitely spent some time there in my Mount Allison days. So, again, I was like, I just wanted to kind of bring a different angle to it, a different, bring a little bit of fun and, authenticity to it, right? So I did that, and then I did some coaching one-on-one on Zoom and in person, and then did some group sessions. I also had the privilege of sitting in on some of the pitch contests and some of the student presentations. So it's been so fun to see where, how some of the students have grown, and how, sometimes they just, like all of us, sometimes you just need a person to like cheer you on and to, give you a different perspective. Sometimes you need someone to open a door for you. So that's always been important to me since my Mount A days, is to, connect people with each other and to opportunities, or, if a student needed, a mentor for this or whatever it was, I was happy to try and help. And I know, I'm done with that role now, but I think this has really ignited a fire for me to recognize that it actually can be easy to give back to your university or to your campus.
Well, exactly, Angela. In fact, we always talk about uh, what we ask of alumni is the four T's, right? Their talent, their time, their treasure, and their testimony. And it sounds like you were able to do all four in this position. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule for our students. I know that they appreciated it.
Yeah, I think, I feel like the funny part too, Carol, is that probably more alumni can realize how doing some of these things can make a difference for themselves.
Mhm.
Right? Like, I know I agree with you on, the importance of giving back and doing all those things, and recognizing that you can help other people, help your community. And I those are invaluable. But I think what I came to learn this year was how big of an impact doing something like this could have on myself. And so, again, invaluable.
Yeah. Oh, well, this is kind of our wrap up question. It's gone by very fast, but having spent time coaching the rugby team and working with our entrepreneurial students, what advice would you give any Mount Allison student or recent graduate who aspired to make a difference either through leadership or volunteering or entrepreneurship?
I think that oftentimes, we get asked the question from the time we're young, and especially as you are, into high school, and then you're, moving into university, people keep asking you the question of what's next, right? What's next? What's next? And we often feel as if we have to have a good answer, right? Like, we have to have it mapped out. We have to have like this master plan. Things need to fall into place. But the reality is, we never know what's going to come around the corner. So some things are going to be super positive and some things are not. And things, a goal or a dream, a passion that we have, you know, maybe it's going to work out exactly as you think, and quite often it's not. So I feel as if, my biggest advice is just to do the things that you feel called to do each day and each week and each year. And if something is, if something is like really firing you up and feels exciting and feels like something you want to do, like, don't worry if it doesn't fit into the master plan that that you had for yourself. Just continue to follow your curiosity and follow your passion. And, I'm sometimes hesitant to say follow your heart because not everyone understands what I mean. But it's exactly those things. So it's, follow your curiosity. And if you start a program and it's like, it's not lighting you up and you feel like you need to add something do that. If it's you're doing a program, or you've taken a job and you feel like there's something more that you need, maybe it's not meant to be in your job. Maybe it's meant to be something that you're volunteering to do, or somebody that you're helping. And like I said, I think it's just keeping an open mind, and following the things that feel like they're calling you to do.
Well, Angela, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been inspiring. I think that's the word I would use. So,
Thank you.
speaking of one word, and listen, this is actually a good time. We're going to put in a plug right now. There is a reunion of the rugby teams afoot. The planning
Yes.
is beginning, and you're involved in that. So
Yes.
that's we don't have a date yet, but it's in the works. So that should be
Yes,
a really good time.
it should.
Before we leave you, I do have some words for you. So to finish off the podcast, I'm going to say one word, and you
Okay.
will respond with one word. Kind of the first thing that comes to mind. It's not
Okay.
okay.
The like competitive athlete in me is like, I'm like buckling down. I'm like ready, ready to go.
I'm sure you will score. Number one, rugby,
Amazing.
British Columbia,
Beautiful.
Canadian Armed Forces. Will you
Life changing.
entrepreneurship,
Journey.
Moncton,
Home.
heart,
Work.
athletics,
Magic.
and the last word, Mount Allison.
Home.
Thank you, Angela. Angela Harris, class of 1996. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
A sincere thank you to the executive producer and director of our podcast, Kay, who is the quadrant intern at the Alumni Engagement Office. A sincere thank you to them, and especially to the fine folks at CHMA FM Radio who have made all of this possible by allowing us to use their facilities here on campus.
Mount Allison strives to be a safe, respectful, and welcoming place for people of all genders, diverse sexualities, gender identities, and gender expressions through education, programming, support, and advocacy. We prioritized upholding, maintaining, and honoring that environment during the creation of this podcast.